Aswad Thomas, who's the Vice President of the Alliance for Safety and Justice and the National Director of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. Welcome to Let's Talk. That was a lot.
No, thank you so much for having me on today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So we got a march coming to Washington, D.C. on September the 24th. Tell us about it.
Yeah, on Tuesday, 24th, thousands of survivors. We have over 50 buses from across the country that will be traveling to DC for the first ever Crime Survivor Speak March on Washington to really demand a right to heal and a new approach to public safety. So we're going to be marching from the National Mall to the Capitol at Union Square for a rally and a candlelight vigil.
So, when you say survivors, Aswad, who are you talking about? The families? Who are those survivors that we should expect to see here in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, so Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, we are a national network of over 200,000 survivors from across the country. That includes parents that have lost children to violence. That include victims of domestic violence, victims of sexual assault, victims of human trafficking, and victims of gun violence, like me, are part of this network to share our stories, to heal together, but most importantly, to advocate for a new approach to public safety. So we're bringing together a wide range of experiences and people from all across the country that experience crime and violence, but come to DC to make sure our voices are heard in our nation's capital.
One of the sad things, but the realities, Reverend Jackson is having his own health challenges right now. But one of the things he used to do when he would go to high schools around the country is to ask young people, how many of you all know someone or have had someone in your family, your friends, who are victims of gun violence? And 90% of the young people would raise their hands, and that has not changed. Yep. Right. And so here you are involved with this project. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, for me, I'm a former basketball player. In 2009, I had just graduated from college. I was the first male of my family to ever graduate from college. I had signed with a sports agent. I went to Elms College in Massachusetts. And so okay. My nickname was the Black Steve Nash. So if you follow basketball, I'm known as the Black Steve Nash. But, I had a very good college career and was on my way to play professional basketball overseas in Europe. But unfortunately, 3 weeks before I was supposed to leave to go to Europe, I was shot twice in my back while leaving a corner store in my neighborhood at the time in Hartford, Connecticut. And that incident ended my professional basketball career and nearly my life. But just like so many victims that look just like me and you, after that experience, I never received any services or resources to help me heal and deal with that incident. And during that recovery process, law enforcement came to visit me several times. And each time they came to visit me, it was always about the case. They never asked me how I was doing. They never told me about any victim services. They never even told me that there was a victim advocate in their department that's supposed to work with victims like myself. So my family and I never received no help after that.
And are you saying that these services existed, but they never shared that information with you?
Yeah, so every state had a victim compensation program. If you lost a loved one to a homicide, for example, there are resources available to help with funeral and burial expenses. If you are a victim of domestic violence and you need to seek counseling and therapy, there's a program in every state called the Victim Compensation Program. The challenge with that program is that we did a study. We found out that 96% of crime victims do not access that state's victim compensation program because most people don't know about it. Even if you know about it, this long application process. There are some crazy policies. For example, in order to be eligible for this compensation program, in some states, you have to file a police report within 48 hours after becoming a victim. Right. And even if you meet that threshold, in some states, you may have a year or two to apply for the program, and that's expected as you're healing from violence. So most victims do not access support from programs like the Crime Victim Compensation Program. That's why we are doing this march to really elevate that issue in addition to others as well at the national level.
Wow, that's and with there's so much focus. I was talking to someone the other day, but there's so much focus on the crime itself,
Mm.
not enough on prevention, and definitely, clearly, based on what you're sharing with us, not enough with the after effects. What
Mhm.
happens to the victim? What happens to the families? It's there's a long list of stories that come, which you're certainly bringing my attention to. So I mean, how did this idea? Is this the first time? Well, it says the inaugural march. So where did this idea come from?
Yeah, what really inspired this idea of this crime survivor speak march on Washington and bring together like those victims from across the country. We all share that common experience of being victims and not getting any help, no matter what your victimization was. And this idea of this march is because we have a dual crisis in this country. We have a public safety crisis, and then we also have a mass incarceration crisis, right? And people think, this crisis around mass incarceration is like totally different from this crisis around safety. But it turns out they are actually the same crisis. And the solutions to both of those crises is literally staring us in the face. They have been staring us in the face for decades, because there are people who got hurt and never got any help, just like me, right? And there are people who got hurt and ended up in the justice system, just like the teenager that had shot me. And so we can actually solve, the mass incarceration crisis. We actually can solve the public safety crisis by listening to crime victims and listening to their experiences and having that inform what public safety policy should look like. And it's more trauma recovery centers, is more services and resources to help people heal. It's more about rehabilitation. It's also more about when people are coming out of the justice system, that they're able to access housing and jobs. Those are the things that have been proven to stop repeat cycles of violence, and we need to invest in those things for our families and our communities.
So I'm really thrilled that you're here, to talk about this and what you're involved in. I mean, sometimes, and I have to hate to say this, I mean, but from a media standpoint, you know, we we may or other news organizations may cover an incident,
Mm,
right? And it's kind of hard sometimes to knock on the door
mm,
afterwards of a victim to say, how are you feeling? Right? And whether they are even willing to talk to
mm.
or to tell their story. You folks are coming here to speak, to tell their stories. But can you maybe give us some ideas or advice on how do we get victims to tell their stories?
I think one of the most important things, you have to actually provide spaces to listen to crime victims. At Crime Survivor Safety and Justice, there are three things that we do. We listen to victims and survivors of violence. We bring them together to provide that peer-to-peer support that we all need after we experience any type of trauma or violence. We have to being able to help listen to those experiences, and that should be driving what our policies and programs look like. Our organization is called Crime Survivors Speak for a reason. We provide that platform for survivors to share their stories, and just by doing that, we've been able to pass over 100 legislative bills across the country that have changed victim compensation programs in several states, that have established these 54 of these trauma recovery centers. Just imagine if there was a center in a community where someone experienced crime and violence, they can literally just go right into that community center and get access to free counseling and therapy, get access to support to help them heal or recover from that experience without having to pay a fee for those services. So we've established these trauma recovery centers, and also we've kind of helped to elevate what public safety looks like to us. Is providing those spaces for people to share those stories, and we do that by bringing survivors to their state capital across the country. And now we are organizing thousands of survivors from 30 states to come to our nation's capital to really uplift what safety looks like, or look like to us, and it's that right to heal, and is this new approach to public safety instead of being tough on crime.
Do you have any examples of model programs that you think need to be replicated that you can highlight and say to states, this is what works?
Yeah, I think the one is what I just talked about is a trauma recovery center model.
Okay.
So, when I was a victim of gun violence, I was shot twice in my back. I was discharged from that hospital back into the same community where I lived, right? And so my doctors told me about the physical challenges that I would have, but they never mentioned the psychological effects of being a victim of the PTSD, the anxiety, the flashbacks, the nightmares. Nobody prepared me for that experience of being a victim, and in law enforcement, didn't provide any help. All of the local and government funded agencies that get funding to support victims, they didn't provide any help. The only organization that provided help to me and is consistent to with so many victims across the country, it was an organization of mothers who've all lost their children to gun
Mm,
violence. The only organization that came knocking on my door to provide any type of support, and that organization and those type of organizations that exist all across the country are doing such amazing work, but the majority of them don't have funding. They're mostly
right.
all volunteer based. They're using their 401k. They provided all of these services, but we're not invested in those community based organizations, and that's what we need to. That's why we are, bringing over 200 of those grassroots organizations to DC next week.
We're going to put the flyer up again, but again, give us the details of the march.
Yeah, so September 24th, we're going to be starting our march at 10 a.m. At the National Mall. So join us on 7th Street Northwest in Madison for our march. Then we're going to be marching up to the Capitol for our rally and our candlelight vigil that will start at 11 o'clock. But stay tuned. Don't leave after that rally and that candlelight vigil, because we're going to go back to the National Mall at 12 o'clock for a healing and a music festival. We have a few of our
Wow.
celebrity friends that will be joining us for this event. So hopefully you all can join us on this march and rally, which is much more than a march. This is right, elevating what safety look like to crime victims, and this idea that all survivors should have a right to heal, and we want a new approach to public safety, and that's what we are calling for as part of this new victims' rights movement.
Well, we're going to take a close look at what's happening here in the DMV,
Mm,
and I probably need you as a resource for that as well, to see what we could be doing better. We
mm,
know that there, particularly in the community where we're located here in Washington, D.C., where there's a high rate of violence. And
mm,
again, a lot of times we don't look at the victims or the survivors. We don't even know, we know someone survived, but we don't know the story. And so I am just really excited that you all are doing this march, bringing attention to survivors, and have some recommendations on what can be done to actually heal our
mm.
communities. So thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And as we say, is when survivors speak, change happens. And looking forward to seeing you all marching with us on Tuesday.
Wonderful, Aswad. Thank you so very much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
You too.
Okay.